Well, welcome back. I think Lynn is putting her other monitor on mute. Um, we had a fantastic day yesterday. I was reminded of why I enjoy working in this space. From the sessions that were very tech heavy, where I learned a lot of different ways um, to play around with gadgets and different platforms and whatnot, to the sessions that were pedagogy heavy, where I was learning different methodologies for instruction or how to approach and recruit and all of that sort of thing. And then at the end of the day, we got an opportunity to see and hear from some students, which, of course, I miss being in the classroom. So any opportunity to see the fruits of our labor is exciting to me. So Lynn, I was just telling them how much I enjoyed yesterday and how much that experience reminded me of how much I like working in this space. And I didn't mention the impacts of technology conversations that we had, even from the watch party last night. So that was exciting. So definitely looking forward to today and picking back up on all those threads throughout the day.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I got kicked out, but I'm back, and I think I was telling Brian earlier, I think that after the watch party last night, I had so many thoughts that I was thinking about. And one of them is on how much I think it's important to value building community with educators and with teachers to move our conversations forward in a direction where we can talk more about dismantling structures that are still prohibiting students and even teachers from participating in quality computer science education and providing opportunities, for a greater array of students, not just to enroll and, be in a class, but to excel and to succeed and, have opportunities for upward mobility. I think gathering, educators together to move those conversations forward is something that I myself want to work on and do better at.
Yeah. The chat last night was at least as inspiring as the movie, which was great. Right, the movie was fantastic, but the chat was equally fantastic, and it was just everybody's voices chiming in on their things that they had been exposed to or their perspectives. It was very enriching.
So with that said, we have a full program again for today, tons of sessions. Just one thing that I think we forgot to mention yesterday, last year's event was actually a 3-day event. And this year we had just as many submissions and probably even more, just as many submissions for sessions, which we had to sort of fill in 2 days, not 3. And so the day is a little bit longer. But the sessions are totally worth it. Sessions are totally worth it. And we're going to kick off today with some amazing presenters.
Before we move in, can we do a quick reminder?
Yeah,
I love this functionality in Hopin. I want to remind everybody else to take advantage. I had some really good networking sessions yesterday. We have a couple of opportunities throughout the day for you to network with other people. All you do is click on the networking tab and it'll match you with somebody for 8 minutes to connect and get to know them. I talked to somebody from Canada yesterday, and so it was a really good opportunity. And also our expo. So a lot of our presenters and some of our partners have opportunities in the expo for you to go and engage with them and learn more about what they're doing. So that's another tab over there on the left, is to click and explore the expo when you get an opportunity. All right.
No, thank you for reminding me about that. I think one thing that I really like about this platform is the chat as well, too. You can directly contact any participant that is attending the summit. And, also feel free to use the chat to communicate, ask your questions, post your thoughts. Brian and I, we like to elevate, chat conversations that are going to help us shift our mindset and move us forward in a positive way. So we welcome you to have that conversation in the chat as well. So without further delay, we want to quickly introduce Dr. Nicol Howard and Dr. Tia Madkins. Dr. Nicol Howard is an assistant professor, and she is also the program coordinator in the School of Education at the University of Redlands, and that is California. And we so appreciate both of them being on with us at such earlier hours than our Eastern time. And we also have Dr. Tia Madkins, who is the assistant professor in the STEM education program and Department of Curriculum and Instruction at UT Austin. And they are going to be presenting on engaging equity pedagogies in CS learning environments. They actually have a fantastic paper on this, and I'd like to post a link on that in the stage in a little bit so that you can have access to that information. It is a really great read, and I think we're going to learn so much from them. So we're going to go ahead and bring them on stage now.
Now, coming to the stage, drum roll, please. Dr. Madkins.
Hello, Dr. Madkins.
Good morning, everyone.
And we'll also bring on...
And starting at point guard.
Pardon me. I actually think Dr. Howard is having technical difficulties, so she's going to log back on in just a moment. So I'll go ahead and get started for us, if that's okay.
All right.
She just texted me.
Will. Okay, then we will welcome you. Very warm welcome. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to learning a lot from your presentations. We'll see you in just a little bit then, okay?
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you see the closed captions? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I'm not sure if you can see the closed captioning or not. I did hit the toggle button. Okay, well, good morning, everyone.
Try one more time, and when you click on the closed captioning option, all right, go to the first option, the toggle captions.
Okay.
And if not, that's fine. Well,
is it? Let's see. Okay, there we go. I was like, it was working a few moments ago when we checked. All right, great. Good morning, everyone. Leave it to the CS and the tech people to have tech difficulties, but we're educators. We're very flexible. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you to the Constellations team for inviting Dr. Howard and me to present and to share with you all today. We also want to give gratitude to all of the educators and district personnel, everyone who's here, who's been doing such amazing work with learners and their families during the COVID-19 context. We just can't say thank you enough for the great work that you continue to do in such a difficult time. It is very early for both Nicole and me at 7 o'clock where I am, and it's 6 a.m. where she is, so please be patient with us. We're still having our coffee and waking up fully. So we're going to talk a little bit with you today about equity pedagogies and really thinking about what it means to teach with equity in mind. This is not a presentation about inclusion or disability studies. Those are not our areas of expertise, but we can't speak to learners who are multiply marginalized in that way, but our expertise is as researchers and educators who want to support those of you who are in the classroom or working outside of the classroom with young people in computer science learning environments, particularly for minoritized learners. We know that we're all at different points on this equity-focused journey, and we're all growing and working together in service of the young people that we care so much about and their families and their communities. So let's remember to be kind to one another and to ourselves as we learn more. And continue on this journey, and let's extend grace to ourselves and to each other. But let's also remember to hold each other accountable to actually do the work. It's the only way that we're going to keep growing. All right, so today we're going to spend some time defining equity and equity-focused computer science teaching and learning. We're going to talk a little bit about integrating computer science with an equity lens. We're going to provide you with some practical examples, and then we'll leave you with a few resources. As it was mentioned earlier, we'll leave you with a link for our article. It's free for everyone to download, so there's no charge for that. And then we have a couple of other resources that we think will be helpful for you. Okay. So our paper begins by saying we advocate for the use of equity-focused teaching and learning as an essential practice within computer science classrooms. So we really want to center the idea that this is inextricable from your teaching practices, that you have to learn to teach with equity in mind. This doesn't just happen magically or by happenstance. It has to be intentional work. And so part of our journey today will be for you to, we want to unpack that a little bit so that everyone understands what it means. So we want to start by asking each of you in the audience to define equity. I apologize for the background noise. Would you please go to the chat and type your name and kind of what your role is, whether you're a classroom-based educator, district personnel, etc., and then type your definition of equity, but do not hit send or go. Just wait for me to say go, and we'll all send them at the same time and do a little bit of a waterfall. So please type your name, your role, and then define equity. Give you a few more seconds to do that. Okay, great, go. Let's see what y'all have to say. I'm not seeing anything in the chat from folks, but hopefully you've had a chance to share and to think about what equity means to you and how you define that. As we go throughout the presentation, I want you to think about how your definition either maps onto what we talk about or not, and think about how you might want to shift your thinking. Okay, so we define equity in computer science learning environments. Okay, sorry, here we are. So justice-oriented approach. We define equity by thinking about that from a justice orientation. And so by that, we simply mean we're moving beyond access and achievement frames. Hi, Dr. Howard.
I made it. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I said leave it to the tech and the CS people to have technical difficulties.
Exactly.
So we're just talking about a justice-oriented approach. It's one where learners can use their computer science knowledge in ways that they see fit to transform their communities and make connections to other content areas, particularly other STEM concepts. It's not just about being the next big tech industry worker. Rather, we allow learners to define what success looks like for them, how they want to use that computer science and other STEM knowledge. And so we have to really ask ourselves, what are we inviting learners into when we ask them to engage in computer science teaching and learning? Are we asking them to do what we want? Are we inviting them onto a pathway where they get to decide? And so part of that approach means that we have to view equity with a lens that moves beyond equality of access. So thinking about course offerings, resources, access to quality teachers, all of those things are important, but it's not enough. We also have to think about moving past achievement and thinking about just test scores and grades and like outcomes like that. We have to think about a justice orientation. And that means that we're also thinking about deficit perspectives or thinking. And so in order to engage a justice-oriented approach, we have to identify and reject deficit thinking, which means viewing learners and their families as deficient or in need of repair, especially those learners who are racially, ethnically, culturally, or linguistically different from us. Instead, we have to use a strengths-based approach where we as educators learn how to recognize, draw, and build upon their strengths. We have to actually bring that into the classroom and draw upon those things in order to teach well. It also means drawing upon their lived experiences. And so we really have to find ways to connect that to course content. I'm going to skip the next slide for the sake of time.
Right. So I can hop in here and just obviously today our focus is on equity-focused CS teaching, and there are some things that we need to consider along the way as educators. Let me just go ahead and center and ground myself first and just say how much I appreciate this opportunity to be here to talk with you all. And as always, I'm honored to present with Dr. Tia Madkins. So very excited to be here even early in the morning. So back to things that we should consider. First and foremost, your beliefs and your learners' beliefs and how they impact the computer science classroom. These are a priority. They drive and inform the work that you do, whether it is that you're focusing on opening up more opportunities for students or for access. What you believe about your students informs the opportunities that you offer and how you go about ensuring equal access. It also informs your lesson design and your pedagogical choices. For example, will you do tiered activities with students? For some students, you may find that tiered activities are very beneficial. Same with paired programming. Your pedagogical choices in your lesson design and just your decisions in general are driven by your beliefs. And so we definitely want you to consider that first and foremost. On our next slide, there are a couple of other things that we want you to definitely consider as an educator in a computer science classroom. First, as you consider your beliefs, we also encourage an identification of your purpose. What is your purpose? When you come into the classroom, are you looking to focus on self-expression and or just preparing students for computer science? Are you thinking about supporting students in developing their own autonomy? Are you looking to build capacity? Or are you arbitrarily adhering to the standards and following what's expected of you by your district's pacing guide? So what is your purpose? What brings you to the instruction? Also, think about ways in which you can support your students' identity development. We know that it's not enough to just be aware of power dynamics and aware of intersectional identities and learner expression, but how are you addressing these things in the classroom, and how are you allowing the students an opportunity to do the same? Next, personal and socio-political relevance of technology. And so for those of you who had a chance to read our article, you're probably very familiar with these concepts, and we do dive in deeper in the article. But we want to raise awareness of these equity-focused CS teaching practices, just as a reminder, but also to give you a way to ground the work that you do. And also, I would say, in addition to the personal and socio-political relevance of technology and examining, and we'll offer some resources to support with this work, but in examining and supporting your students, you want to situate the ideas related to technology in context, and then give them an opportunity to push back a bit, give them an opportunity to critique. This also supports in their development as creative agents and change agents in order for them to begin to legitimize their own experience. In legitimizing the learner experience or the expertise, think about opportunities for students to share their work, not just sharing their work with the community broadly, but also with parents and families. And we say this, and we'll go ahead and move to the next slide, specifically as we think about our young learners who may not be ready to share with the broad community just yet. It is great to give opportunities and support them in being able to share what they do, what they create, what they innovate with families. This quote is taken from DeSalvo, Reed, Rashan, and actually Roque. It's more of a synthesis of some of the work that they do related to parents, and they say parents without backgrounds and insights into the changing landscape of technology struggle to negotiate what roles they can play, such as how to work together in computing activities or how to find learning opportunities for their children. We don't by any way show you this framing of their work as a way to push you into thinking of new stereotypes or any type of stereotypes about parents. No, what we're saying here is that some parents will look for support from you as an educator and how to guide their own children. So as you're working with students and supporting them and creating room for them to empower themselves, we encourage you to give them opportunities to share with their families so that they can learn together as a community. This also lends itself to community engagement, because when we speak of parents, we also like to say community involvement, because we know especially our students from minoritized backgrounds often define family and parents differently. And so parents and family can be inclusive of their pastors, can be inclusive of their mentors, their aunties, their tias, their uncles. It can be inclusive of many people. So we want to think beyond just sharing with mom and dad, but how are they sharing and engaging with the community? Engaging with the community, this might be for another presentation, but it also involves supporting their thinking around the work that they can do to innovate to support their community. So it's a mutually beneficial exchange when we support our students in their development of becoming creative agents and change agents.
All right, so in this next part of our presentation, we want to provide you with some practical examples to prompt your thinking about how you and your colleagues that you might work with can engage equity-focused computer science teaching and learning. And so remember, we're working together with a common purpose, right, to achieve a common goal, facilitating an equitable, which is a justice-oriented learning experience for all of the children that we work with, no matter what grade level they're in. And I'm finally able to see the chat. Thank you to those of you who reminded me to click on stage and not event. Many people were talking about access for all and thinking about giving everyone an opportunity. Some of you were talking about justice and thinking about giving everyone what they need and making sure that everyone feels included. And also, I love what Shana wrote here. It's all about power. So we need to be thinking about those power dynamics. And we also need to be thinking about what those power dynamics look like in our classrooms and our work with the children that we work with, right? So are we giving space for our students to become the teacher? And are we giving space for us as educators to become learners once again? And so thinking about that, right, thinking about that justice orientation, we really want to focus on building community. And so thinking about the ways that you can really work with the young people in your classrooms to foster a space where they feel safe, where they actually feel loved, where they feel like they are important and their ideas matter. When our young people know that we respect them and that we care deeply about them and that we don't view them as individuals in need of repair or fixing, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more into whatever it is that we are trying to offer them in the classroom. And so we just want you to be mindful of that and think about the different ways that you might do that. Some examples that we've used before is just taking time at the beginning of class is very simple, right? Just to get to know them, to ask them what's going on, and to also open up ourselves, right? To share more about our lives with them so that they're more comfortable sharing about their lives and giving them opportunities to see where they see computer science concepts in their everyday lives and bring that back into the classroom. Again, this is helping them to think about how to use that knowledge and the different ways that they can go about using it, whether they choose to pursue computer science as an undergraduate major in college or go into the tech fields, whether they pursue an undergraduate degree or not. And then finally, think about innovative professional learning opportunities. Part of doing this work means that we have to really commit to continuing to learn. So this isn't a one and done. You cannot read how to be fill in the blank and be done with it. So this is not a book club once a month kind of a thing. This is daily work where we're learning and we're unlearning. And so we invite you all to think about the different ways that you might collaborate with your colleagues, to think about how you might go about professional learning together, how you might plan together, and think about revamping your computer science curricula so that it has more of a justice orientation and that shows up in your teaching. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about professional learning communities. So I'll go on to the next slide. So coming back to classroom community, we have to remember that we should be self-aware. We have to be relational with our students. So going back to that idea of thinking about the ways that we foster community with them and that we're in relationship with the young people in our classrooms. The pictures that you see here are two incredible teachers that I've worked with in a program based in California, and that's now expanded across the US. But these folks actually spend time sharing and building community before they actually get into teaching the content. And so they're very mindful of the space and the kind of the energy, the vibe that's in the classroom. And so they open up space for just giving time to talk before they actually go into teaching. And then they try to bring those things back into the classroom. They're intentional about that. So they take notes and think about what students have shared so that they can come back to that and use that in their teaching. And again, this is about intentionality. This does not by happenstance. So all of these things that we're doing, they work together. I'm sorry. So just as a reminder, connect with learners' cultural practices and lived experiences. We're trying to empower them to become change agents, and we're trying to foster and maintain relationships with learners, families, and communities. And now I'm going to hand off to Dr. Howard to talk about professional learning communities.
All right. So we talk about professional learning communities. I'm sure many of you, especially during the time of COVID, have thought differently about how you connect with one another or how you find each other and how you build community. So going back to even the waterfall activity and its purpose, it's really important to not only know what brings you to the work, but to also get to know those around you. Get to know how they're engaging with this equity-centered CS teaching. And building community is important because it makes the work even that much more sustainable. So it's about finding not only those who are doing the work exactly in the area you're doing the work in, so whether it's at the high school level or middle school level, but it's also thinking about that pipeline and thinking thinking really, about the fact that your work doesn't happen in a vacuum, that there are others who are preparing students before they actually reach your classroom, and that you are actually preparing your learners to move on to their next class or their next career, or their sometimes for some students, their next career opportunity, even as a student, even as they're a learner in your classroom. So building your learning community can happen virtually. It can happen also face-to-face. And so one example of how I have worked with groups of computer science teachers as well as service teachers, I think it might be on our next slide. I've actually brought in computer science opportunities into our pre-service educators' classrooms in order to have them actually tinker and actually engage in the work that they're doing, practice, test it out, try it out, and really to grapple with, as many of you have noted in the chat already, this notion of what it means to ensure that your work is equity-centered. What we sometimes think it looks like is not always what it is. So to have others around you who you feel comfortable with being yourself, being, as I'm sure Dr. Madkins already said, and because this is something I've often heard her say, and she reminds us all to extend grace to one another. So creating those spaces where you can extend grace to one another and support each other in the work, it's very valuable. Also, in addition to bringing this into pre-service environments, I think about the fact that I say this often, we have coding clubs for students. Having coding clubs and opportunities for computer science educators to actually do the same work, that create the same moment that I've done with pre-service educators, that was something important to me as well. And so I have worked with in-service teachers where they have had an opportunity to look at technologies and also to question the technologies themselves, and to also have discussions around the vendor, how the vendors came about creating that technology. Is that piece of technology that they're planning to bring into their classroom? For example, if it's a physical computing class, is it an equity-focused resource or tool? Is there consideration given to the racialized, gendered experiences of our students and the design of that tool, whether it's web-based or whether it's physical? And sometimes it takes having others in your community to engage in conversation with, to hear each other's thoughts, to actually realize, I'm right about how I feel about this tool. And it's affirming to have that conversation. And sometimes you may raise a point or raise a question about a tool or technology that others have not thought about. So remember your own expertise as you come into your learning communities, and remain open to learning from one another. And Dr. Madkins, did you want me to keep going there?
Yeah, do you want to share this one?
Sure. So this is the article we were talking about, shameless plug here, but it is with the Journal of Computer Science Integration. We are in the process of migrating platforms. So the design today will be very different. As we know, technology evolves, and so we're looking to do a bit of an upgrade to the platform itself. But you can find other articles related to computer science that do talk about, even at the secondary level, this tiered system of computer science. But we also have our article, of course, is in the JCSI as well. So please check that out when you have a moment, and check out the other articles that are there. One other point too, we love and welcome articles from our current classroom teachers too. So please feel comfortable in reaching out to me if you have an article idea that you would like to publish. And we're happy to work with you. Dr. Madkins is on our editorial board. And so we have great folks who are doing this work, who are happy to collaborate. And we think that work is important too. We as researchers and working in higher education, we don't do this alone. We know that there's value to us connecting across spaces. So please reach out to us. Okay, and then the K-12 STEM equity, that is the recent publication with the other Dr. Howard and I, Coding Plus Math. If you haven't had a chance to check out that website, you'll see our son come out, leads a couple of tutorials on using some different math. Of the journal, again, is Journal of Computer Science Integration. I will drop the link in the chat briefly too, but if you have a chance, check out our website, K-12 STEM Equity, and if you want to buy the book, pick that up too. But the site has some really great examples of lessons, and Kamal takes you through and can take students through how to build and create some of these coding activities. Oh, and this is just another article for our early learners, younger students, are supporting younger learners. This piece was about how our educational technology leaders are often tapped to do this work. And we know that that is a topic for probably another day as well. But this particular article talks about some things to consider as we engage all in doing this work together. And then finally, I think,
yes, we have some other resources for you. Again, this is just a reminder that this isn't a one and done. So we're trying to offer you lots of resources to support your teaching and your learning for both you and your colleagues that you might work with at your school sites, or whether you're out of the classroom. This particular book chapter, we're happy to send you. Again, we'll put all of these things in the chat. We have all of the links set up for you all. And then we'll leave you with our information to contact us on Twitter or via email. If you can't download them, we don't want you to have to pay for anything. But this is a chapter in a book that came out last year. I highly recommend it. It's not too expensive, but the particular chapter that we have here is called Learner-Centered and Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. So again, it just offers some other practical examples about how to actually engage this work in your classroom environment, whether that's in school or out of school. And that's with a few colleagues, Dr. Chiquita Thomas, Rita McLear, and quite a few other names that you'll probably be familiar with in computer science education. And then these are just some other tools that we love. I don't know if you all are familiar with Ruha Benjamin's work, but she has some great books. Dr. Nikki Washington, who I know is another speaker in this conference, has some great ideas just around making space for every student. This is a medium.com piece that she has that's just really easy to read and just lots of great ideas to grasp onto. And then I really love the book We Are Data. It really talks about data, but I find this very helpful for us thinking about identities and why we can't ignore those in the classroom. And so the book kind of outlines a lot about data science and how they're mining for lots of data. And they're spending so much time on that. And I think about that as a heuristic or a model for us as educators to really think about the ways that we have to deeply know our students and bring those identities, all of their identities, right? They're racialized, gendered, class, all of those things, but also who they are in terms of computer science learners and future professionals, and really foster and help develop those different identities. And finally, we'll just leave it open for Q&A now. I think I'm going to mute myself for just a second, and then we'll put these things in the chat. And then just put them in the chat, and we will answer them.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's spawned quite a few comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A. Let me see if I can grab a couple of those so we can explore them. I think the first one was from Dr. Mons. She said, from your research findings, what have you discovered to be the greatest barrier to engaging equity in CS? You all are still both muted.
That's a big question. Greatest barrier, I'm going to take that. I'm not sure if it means greatest barrier in terms of kind of systemic things. That's a big issue that might be too big to handle. We know that those systemic inequities are there. the question is more about kind of the biggest barrier around teaching. It's really having consistent professional learning opportunities. To be honest, I think that's one of the biggest barriers to thinking about equity-focused teaching, is having time to learn, and to really be intentional about revising our lesson plans so that we're layering in those justice orientations. And so thinking about social justice issues. One of the resources that we will share with you all is something that one of my undergraduate researchers set up for us, and really links social justice issues to computer science content. I think that's one of the biggest barriers I found in my work with teachers, is that people find it really difficult to layer on those issues and connect them to computer science content. So we'll share some resources for doing that kind of work. I don't know if Dr. Howard has anything to add on.
Dr. Madkins, I think you covered it well.
Okay. The next question, I wish Lynn was on to ask this one so I can leave it alone. But critical race theory is a big debate these days. In what ways does your research in K-12 education strategy support, reject critical race theory?
I'm going to jump in here first. There is a debate these days. I would say the research that we do, and even the strategies, definitely do not reject critical race theory. I know the work that I do is informed by various theories, but critical race theory would be a theory that my work is informed by. I do think this is an interesting time. I know we're often that it means that we're teaching critical race theory in the classroom explicitly, and that is not what we're doing. We're allowing the theory to inform our practices, which drives us even further into the equity circle.
Dr. Howard, your audio is kind of granular right now, so it's hard to hear.
Okay.
I didn't want you to give this great discourse on your work and not be able to hear it. I don't know, Dr. Madkins, you want to take that and give Dr. Howard a chance to jump off and jump back on?
Sure. So the question was around critical race theory. To be clear, critical race theory, for those of you that have been following the debate, is a theoretical perspective that is mostly taught at the graduate school level. So we would argue, you've probably been seeing it on social media for sure. Most people who teach in K-12 spaces are not teaching critical race theory directly. Now, you might be teaching different ideas about that resonate with critical race theory. For example, whiteness as property is one of the tenets. And so STEM education, computer science education have definitely been claimed as kind of like saviors or whiteness, right? There's some ideas there that can map on, but I assure you, most folks are not doing that day to day. And so it's a very rich theoretical perspective. There certainly are things around a justice orientation that might map onto that, but by teaching with a justice orientation does not necessarily mean that you're teaching critical race theory in your classroom. And I will leave it at that. We can certainly, that's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
I heard the end of what Dr. Madkins said. That's exactly what I was gargling when the sound wasn't working well.
It's working great now.
Great, thanks.
Let's see, another question. Oh, of course, people asking, can you share the link and impact factor for your journal?
Sure. I think we dropped the link a couple of times, and we are a new journal, so the impact factor won't show up for us. I think it's end of this year or early next year when after the migration, when we'll begin to see that populate. So we are at JCS. Should I drop it again?
Sure. Yeah, that helps.
Okay.
The resources that we said we would share into the chat.
Okay.
Perfect.
And I'm a new researcher, so I might reach out to you all.
Great. Thank you.
Now, this next question was mine. I asked, do you have any advice about stimulating your PLC to interact and engage with each other. Like you talked about your professional learning community and how important that is. We're working on our professional learning communities here in Georgia as well. So any advice on stimulating your communities?
From experience, now there's two different things that come to mind. One is for the conversation we're talking about today, right? Equity focused work. It's one level of work that you do to build trust so that everyone is comfortable talking about what they are doing or what they are not doing in their classrooms in order to learn from each other. So I think spending time together and getting to know each other is very important in order to build the trust. So I think taking those moments will help stimulate, because people begin to see, and extending grace, as I mentioned earlier, which Dr. Madkins often talks about too, knowing that this work won't be perfect, and being willing to support each other and extend grace is important. Stimulating as far as the physical work, if you're doing the sharing of resources, it's about tinkering. It's about getting in and working side by side with each other. And sometimes I would say I've noticed it has been helpful when you have educators who are comfortable just sharing what they've done and talking about their pedagogy and giving examples of what they've done in their classrooms. Once they do that, it sort of breaks the seal. Everyone is looking to either share or to learn more about what was shared. So that's another way I would say to stimulate. We sometimes do this where we bring in a lot of readings and say, we'll read this and we'll discuss it. I think it's very important to go a step further, go beyond the book clubs and just the readings, and really, how are you bridging that theory, that if it's critical race theory or if it's just research you've read, how are you bridging that to practice? How are you bringing that into the practice itself? And then some accountability. Now, when we come back together again, let's talk about how we applied that in the classrooms. So
Excellent.
Just some ideas.
And to follow up on that, Chuck has a question. He says, how do we heal and move beyond just having the equity conversation? What does equity and inclusion in action look like to you?
That's a great question. I have lots of ideas about that, but we only have a minute or so left.
Sure.
I think from my point of view, it would mean that young people feel alive in your classroom. They're discussing issues that are very important to them and that are relevant to them and their communities in that moment. And so part of that work, again, goes back to being relational, being mindful, being intentional. So for example, those teachers that I showed you in the picture way back earlier in the slides at the time, in Oakland, there was a lot of police brutality, particularly with young people. And so our students were really, really interested in doing that. And so we showed them, they were as part of the course, they were developing an app. And so we showed them how young people their same ages had developed apps to document police brutality. And so that showed them, one, that they could use CS knowledge in ways that benefit them and their communities. It also showed them that people who look just like them and that are their same ages were doing those things. They went and downloaded those apps on their phones. So we also got to use our phones in class and think about the kinds of things that were available. We're actually doing the work that look like in the classroom. That's what I would expect to see.
Excellent. Dr. Howard, did you want to?
Just a reminder that healing takes time, and healing looks differently for everyone and to everyone. And so it's something important to remember, because I don't know that we move past or beyond the equity conversation. I think we'll always have this conversation around how we can ensure equity remains, because it's very difficult to, I'd love to see a world where we remove all inequities, but I think we'll have to know that it will just take some time to recalibrate, and we just need to remain willing to engage in those conversations and support the healing process.
Agreed. This is the good work. No matter if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, this is the good work. Well, I appreciate you all's perspectives tremendously. I don't know if Lynn wanted to jump on and say anything, but I wanted to, again, thank you tremendously for showing up and for sharing your thoughts and your research. There's Lynn.
No, just another, big thank you for starting our day 2 of this summit, and just so happy that you were able to do this, because everything that we've learned from your presentation is something that we're going to be weaving throughout our conversations today, and also beyond, this summit. So we are very appreciative of the information that you shared with us today. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us. And we'll email you the rest of the links so you have far more to share. But I saw that you said you'd curate that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank y'all so much.
very much.